Hey, good evening, everyone. This is Sophia Nelson, founder and CEO of the Redefining Freedom Center. And this is our first visual podcast of 2025. I wanted to hop on this evening. It is Saturday evening, and boy, what a week it's been. And I thought that given what I see on social media, what's in the news, what I've written, what others are writing, it's been quite a chaotic and distressing and difficult week. I suspect it is the first week of many such difficult weeks for us here in this republic known as the United States of America. I want to give you my thoughts on a few things that have happened this week. And then as we move throughout next month and into the first 100 days of this administration, we'll bring guests on and we'll analyze and dissect and talk about it. But I thought I'd share my thoughts this evening about the collapse of the great United States of America. First of all, I'd like to say that for those of you out there who think that you can ignore this, avoid this, that somehow this doesn't affect you, you're wrong. It affects all of us. None of us is safe from the effects of what is going on. This is Project 2025 on steroids. Those of us who were campaigning for Kamala Harris or who were covering the election as journalists, as columnists, as partisans or not, many of us understood when we read through Project 2025, you didn't have to read through all 900 pages to know that it was going to be a problem, but you had to really understand why Project 2025 was put together. And for me, what I understood was that if Trump was able to get reelected in November, that he was not going to be like he was in his first term, that in point of fact, he would be organized, that his team would be organized, and that they would be ready to strike on day one, as they said, and strike they did. There's too much to unpack in a 15, 20-minute podcast, and I like to keep these short because I think that when we can hit our points and really focus on what's at stake, we have a chance of defeating it. But let me say a couple things about this week. First and foremost, as I said, this affects all of us. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. That is our national motto. And as Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries rightly said, when you look at our founding motto, E pluribus unum, out of many, one, that is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our founders may have started this country half slave and half free, but they understood that there was a vision. As Dr. King talked about in the speech that Republicans love to quote out of context about the content of character and the color of skin and colorblind societies, all of that stuff wasn't talked about for no reason. You have to understand, folks, that when they start taking down pictures of the Tuskegee Airmen, when they start removing history being taught, and it started long before Donald Trump got back in the White House, when they take down the pictures of generals, when they get rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion offices, when they roll back the Equal Opportunity Act of 1965, before I was born, and they're very intentional about who they nominate, and the people aren't qualified. Talk about DEI. Not qualified is an understatement. These people are loyalists to dear leader Donald Trump. And we ought to be clear about not referring to him as the president of the United States of America, because he is not a president of the United States of America. This man is trying to condition aid to California, which has been through an enormously difficult time with the fires, and tell them that they've got to pass a voter ID law. Do you know how long it takes to pass a law in the legislature? So you're going to make Californians wait for aid until they pass a law that you, dictator Donald Trump, believe they ought to pass, but North Carolina voted for you so they get money? I got to speak to my fellow citizens below the Mason-Dixon line where I live in the Commonwealth in Virginia. We're still a blue-purple state. but every other southern state is red. You guys need to wake the hell up, because you've let your anger and your malaise and your dissatisfaction with your own life and where you didn't go and what you didn't get and what you don't have, and you've let that turn into anger and foment into fear and to rage, and you're on social media nonstop, and you're on these crazy websites nonstop, and you listen to lies and disinformation nonstop, and you hate on your fellow Americans who've done nothing to you at all. You hate on the people who are migrants, who pick our food, who work in our factories, who care for our children and tend to our yards and our homes and do labor that white men and black men and other men in this country don't want to do for reasons unbeknownst to me, but it's the truth. And yet you want to run these people out. You want to lock them up. You want to have them put on airplanes and sit back to Mexico, whether they come from Mexico or not. The President of the United States of America threatened Denmark this week in a call that was so disturbing that it made news. AIDS leaked it out because of how distressing it was. He's sending Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, down to Panama, apparently to tell him that we want the Panama Canal back. Are you guys paying attention? This has nothing to do with your damn eggs. Nothing to do with the price of gas or food or inflation or interest rates. This is warfare on the American people. It's racism. It's sexism. It's fear-mongering. It's tribalism. It's division. There's nothing good about anything that this man has done over the last 5 days. Now, you can again believe that or not, but you need to go back to what I said at the outset, and that is, if you think that this is not going to affect you, you're wrong. If you think only your black neighbors are going to get hurt, or those migrants and those illegal immigrants, have any of you checked the crime stats that you talk so much about? Fox and right-wing folks and the rest of MAGA? Because if you actually check those stats, don't believe me, they've got this thing called Google. You can actually check these things. Do you know that in this country every day, hundreds of women, American women, and I think, by the way, what happened to Lake and Riley was awful. And I think that what has happened to any young woman or young man or any American citizen by someone who's not a citizen of this country, and they lose their life or they're molested or beat or robbed or whatever it is, it's wrong. There's no argument. We don't disagree. But my challenge is, what about the people who are citizens? What about the people that open fire on our school children? What about the people that open fire on the people in Las Vegas in the concert or in a club? What about the hundreds of women every day in the United States of America that are victims of domestic violence at the hands of their husbands or fathers or brothers or men that they date? What about those people? What about the crimes that are committed every day in the United States by citizens, the murders, thousands of them annually, the violence, the crime, the perversion, the trafficking? All of that happens here too. And it happens a lot. So it's really easy to scapegoat on others, right? It's really easy to do what they did in Nazi Germany. And using comparisons to Nazi Germany isn't something I take lightly. None of us should. None of us should use it lightly. We should be very sober when we bring up comparisons to Hitler and Nazi Germany. But baby, if you know anything about history, and 1934 through 1939, and if you don't, go Google it. Again, don't believe me. Read, pick up a book, and look at the similarities between what's happening right now in real time, the overwhelm. Hitler dismantled Germany's republic in 50-some days. It was a democratic country too. Jews lived in peace. Germans lived in peace. But you know what happened? Things started to get bad. And the Germans, who were the dominant peoples in Germany, began to see the Jews who were prospering and thriving as a threat. And so Hitler who had his own personal issues with Jews because he didn't get into an art school, right? So he was going to make every Jewish person pay for what he didn't get. Again, that's hate, that's fear, that's resentment. Those are dark emotions. Those are not things we aspire to. Those are not aspirational good things. Those are bad things. And what I'm trying to say to you here is that there are very serious parallels here. And before the German people woke up, as Anne Frank wrote in her diary, children would come home to find their parents missing, or parents would find their children missing, never to be seen again, taken off to concentration camps and brutalized and put in gas chambers and cooked to death. And the world sat by and watched it happen. We've often wondered in our time in the 21st century, how the hell could the atrocities of the 15th and 16th and 17th century slave trade and what was done to native people here in the United States, this was their land before it belonged to any British colony or to any king. And we've often wondered, how did Stalin happen? How did Hitler happen? How did World War I happen or World War II happen? This is how it happens. Right in front of your eyes, and everybody backs up and the media runs for cover because, God forbid, some of you wouldn't get your 7-figure book deals. And I should start calling names because I know a lot of you. I used to consider you friends of mine, but I don't anymore. Because you have proven you are about yourself and your pockets and what's yours. And you actually think you can save yourself by bending the knee, by kissing the rump. But you can't. Because when you get a person like this in office, a man who is so immoral and so godless and so gutter-ridden that he goes into the National Cathedral for a prayer service, and when the bishop says what a good bishop or pastor or priest or rabbi or cleric or clergy should say, which is we should practice mercy and kindness and compassion to our fellow human beings, he demands an apology. What the hell happened to separation of church and state? Do we not have religious liberty anymore? And for those of you that call yourselves Christians, shame on you. You know nothing of WWJD. What would Jesus do? He wouldn't do what you're doing. He would call it out. Jesus wasn't afraid to tell the Pharisees who they were. He wasn't afraid to turn over some tables. This stuff that you guys are doing and calling Christ-like is idolatry. It's blasphemy. It is not of Jesus, and it is not of God. We are sinners all. We all fall short. Bishop Booty may not be a woman whose politics I agree with. Most of them I do not. But she was spot on with what she did in that cathedral that day. She mustered up the courage, more courage than Joni Ernst, someone who I used to admire, a veteran, a woman who served at a time who's been sexually assaulted and really made her way in her rank in the army the hard way. She had to work 10 times harder because of the sexual abuse and assault and violence against women in the military at the time she was in. And she knew in her gut Pete Hegseth was not the right guy. She knew it, and she said it, and they threatened her. And what the hell are we doing? We're watching this, and we're sitting back, and we're all excited about football on Sunday, and we're all excited about the vacations we're going to take, and we're all excited about, hey, this doesn't touch me. That's them. Let them do them. And for the 50% of you that didn't vote, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing? Really? Because this is what we got because you didn't bother to show up. And for those of you that voted for this man, I don't have words. I'm out of words. I don't know what to say about the fact that people voted for this. 76 million of you voted for this. So your fellow Americans could be erased. So your fellow Americans could be assaulted. So your fellow Americans could be put out of jobs. So history could be erased. So history couldn't be taught. So things like the Civil Rights Act and the EEO Act of 1965, people bled in the streets and died and marched for this progress over the last 60 years. White women, you're in this with us if you didn't know. You're on the chopping block too. It ain't just the Mexicans or the Latinos or the Cubans or the migrants or immigrants. It's not just the black folks. It's not just the LGBTQ plus folks. But let me say something about that, and I'm going to end. We're going to have a lot of time to talk about this, but I really just wanted to connect with you to say that I'm outraged, like many of you, but I'm actually going to do something about it. And I would encourage you to do the same. Join something, do something, say something, give something. Get moving, organize, get ready, because we're going to turn 250 years old in 2026. Will we? Will we even have an election in 2026 at this rate? We better start taking this very seriously. But let me end with DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's nothing more than the CRT boogeyman of 2024. Good companies like Target and Walmart that used to really support minority and women businesses who had not had an opportunity that white men have been given from time immemorial. If you want to see what DEI looks like, folks, look at the new Secretary of Defense. That's DEI, DUI, some would say, drunk under the influence. You know, I got to tell you, as a black woman who's in her 50s, who became a lawyer, worked in a big firm, worked in companies, and I've written a lot about this in my books, my experiences, and the horror of the things that I saw as a young woman in the 90s and early in the mid 2000s. I've really been thinking a lot about my grandparents, my parents and my grandparents, and then my great-grandparents, and I don't know how they did it. And we're just getting a small taste right now of what it looks like to be under an oppressive, radicalized, racist, sexist, xenophobic, evil regime. And it hasn't even gotten as bad as it's going to get. I risk my very life doing this video. I get death threats. We all do. There's not one person that's on TV, that writes columns, that is in the media, or that's in a corporation, Costco. They're catching hell from MAGA because they're going to stand on principle. Other companies are. Walmart, Target, they've dumped their principles because it's convenient. Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, he never had any principles, but he's dumped them. Elon Musk, Bezos ran the Washington Post into the ground. One of the greatest papers this country has ever had. Watergate broke at the Washington Post. Katharine Graham is doing flips in her grave. I met her once when I was a young woman. What a lady. Bottom line, it's going to require courage. We're going to have to stand up. But this DEI thing, this is nothing more than a vicious, disgusting lie. A way to attack people of color and other marginalized groups who do nothing through these programs, frankly, other than get an opportunity to sit at the table, have their voices and perspectives heard, and hopefully from recruitment to retention to advancement is the goal. But let me say this, because I understand why Donald Trump got elected. It had nothing to do with your damn eggs or the gas or the inflation. It had nothing to do with that. What it had to do with is fear and division and tribalism and abject racism. The bottom line is that diversity, equity, and inclusion is something all of us should embrace. But I am firsthand living proof, and you all know my story. You know what I went through as a professor at a university. And you know that I asked the question and all hell broke loose. That's the shit, let me just say it, that's the shit that got people to vote for Donald Trump. That kind of foolery where groups decided that you can't think a certain way, speak a certain way, act a certain way, ask a question, have an opinion, do anything that we don't like or that hurts our feelings or that makes us feel unsafe. And if you do that, you will be out of a job. You will wear a scarlet letter. We will ostracize you. We will damage you. We will cancel you. That shit happened. It's real. And I want you to understand, folks, because you're not paying attention. This is what people got tired of. And once people get tired, and once people feel like they're at risk and their jobs at risk or their livelihoods at risk or their families at risk, and they feel like they're being told how to think and how to speak and what to do, they open themselves up to a Pied Piper like Donald Trump. A guy who comes in and says, I got you. I'll fix this. I'll put a stop to all of it. And unfortunately, what happens is what's happening right now. Now we're taking down pictures of Tuskegee Airmen, and we're not going to talk about the Tuskegee Airmen? Do you even know who the Tuskegee Airmen are, you MAGA morons? Do you even know? Because I'm sure you do not. They never lost one bomber in World War II, not a damn bomber. White units could lose 20, 30, 50 bombers. It didn't matter. The black ones couldn't lose one, and they knew it because they were the first. And thank God for Eleanor Roosevelt, who went down and said, these men will get a chance. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, served in the segregated army during World War II. That's how close this is. This isn't 200 years ago. It's not 100 years ago. This is recent history. This has been a tough week for this country. It's been a tough week for the United States of America, and we're only 1 week in. We're going to have to unite. We're going to have to reach out. We're going to have to listen. We're going to have to talk. We're going to have to band together to save the country we love. And we do love this country because it's still that shining city on a hill. It is still the greatest light on the face of the earth. But if we keep sitting by, if we keep disengaging in our civic duty, if we fail to have the courage to get into the arena, we will lose this country before she turns 250 years. I'm going to end with Benjamin Franklin. And after the Declaration and after the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1776, Franklin walked out and a woman said, Mr. Franklin, what kind of government do we have? He looked at her and he said, a republic, if you can keep it. That was 249 years ago this July. It'll be 250 years in July of 2026, our birthday, our sequentennial. The question is, will we keep it or is it gone? I like to believe that people are smart inherently, not book smart, not having to have a lot of degrees on your wall or a lot of names behind your name. I believe that we all have some common sense. What Donald Trump is doing to this country right now, in 5 days, implementing Project 2025, is tearing us apart. People are afraid. I was talking to my neighbor today who works in one of the major federal agencies, and they all have been ordered to go back to work, to the office. And he travels a lot. His job, what he does, he has to go out in the field. And he's like, now I have to be in the office 5 days, and I got to clock in, I got to go, and then I got to go back, come back to the airport and do what I need to do with my team. I don't even know if I'll see all my team because we're all over the world. Good people who've spent a career and a lifetime trying to include others guarantee that we all get a fair shot, not a guaranteed outcome. That's not America. We just all want a shot. It's what Jefferson talked about, that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness that each of us should be guaranteed, not by a government, and we don't do kings in this country, but by God himself. Those inalienable rights that come only from our Creator. That's who we are, and that's who we are supposed to be. And this last week has shown us to be an embarrassment on the world stage. That Pete Hegseth is the Secretary of Defense is sad. That Kristi Noem is the Secretary of Homeland Security is sad. And the other nominees, RFK Jr., we have a bird flu outbreak in places like Georgia and other states. Virginia has cases. And the CDC and the NIH have been cut off from giving information. Why? Why would you not want people to know if there's a flu outbreak in our food supply? Why? Think about that. Start thinking. Stop listening to Fox News. Stop listening to this garbage and actually use your damn good sense, because you do have it. You just have to find the will to use it. That's all I'm going to say for now, but I am going to come back and talk with you many times. And I just wanted you to know how I see it this week. I'm worried, I'm concerned, I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm mortified. But I'm also an American, and these colors don't cut and they don't run. And just as the patriots of Lexington and Concord and other cities in the colonies in 1773 through 1776 decided that they weren't going to cut and run, we can't either. We have a tyrant in our midst. Our founders knew it could happen, which is why they set up a bicameral system of checks and balances. They knew it could happen. It's why they had an impeachment clause and a removal clause. They knew it could happen. But what they didn't know and what they didn't suspect was that our own leaders would turn away from our Constitution and follow someone like this blindly. We got 2 rough years ahead of us. We do. But we're going to have to band together, and we're going to have to believe in each other and talk to each other and work through things and apologize to each other where necessary and heal together. Because that's how we will keep this freedom going. That's how we will keep this great republic. And we will keep it. I love you guys. Till we meet again. Bye-bye now.